Hey y'all! Today I'm in Stewart County, Tennessee, in Brandon Spring, in the area formerly known as Tharp in Land Between the Lakes, to share some history of the Skinner Brandon home. Mostly known only as the Brandon home, as the Brandon sisters, Helen, Lydia, and Ruth, were the last ones to live here, in what was once called Between the Rivers. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, the TVA acquired all the land in the 1960s for Land Between the Lakes, a national recreation area. It's comprised of 170,000 acres in 3 counties, portions of Lyon and Trigg counties in Kentucky, and Stewart County in Tennessee. The Skinner Brandon home, built in 1830, is a nearly 200-year-old log cabin that once sat on this hillside overlooking the Cumberland River. It sat in this location for 137 years. This is the only remaining foundation stone, and it's almost buried. Like many families between the rivers, the Brandon sisters fought to keep their land of 300 acres and historic home, but ultimately everyone was forced to move. They couldn't bear to see their home bulldozed or burned and buried like so many were, and so they decided to take their home with them when they moved. So in 1967, the old log home was disassembled piece by piece, marked, and reassembled like a puzzle in a new location 100 miles away, and it was put back together exactly as it always had been. The move took 3 months. I'm not certain, but I believe these could be remnants from when the home was originally here. I've searched for a photo of when the home sat in this original location, but as of yet, I have been unable to find one. And I find that hard to believe with all the genealogists we have here in Stewart County, that no one has a picture of the home in the original location, but as of yet, I have not found one. This framed photo of the sisters, Helen and Lydia, was taken in 1993 by Beverly Riggins Parker, and it hangs in the lobby of the Brandon Spring Group Center that now stands on the old Brandon farm. These newspaper photos show the reconstruction process and the after pictures of the home in its new location. So where is this home now? People have wondered for years about the location and the condition of the Skinner Brandon home. Was it even still standing? The former residents and their descendants, myself included, have a deep love and connection to this land and the homes that once stood here. We will hike miles back in the deep woods to visit the home places of our ancestors, and we're thrilled if there's anything of the foundations remaining or their fireplace chimneys. So imagine our excitement. While researching for this story recently, I actually found the old home. I was fortunate to meet the current owners and was graciously given a tour. I had chills the whole time I was inside this old beauty, and I am beyond happy to say that it has been very well cared for and is in amazing condition to be nearly 200 years old. I will note that this is a private residence, and I would like to ask that we all respect the owner's privacy. I promised them that I would not disclose the location, and I won't. But I am just so happy to say that it has been so well taken care of throughout the years. Now back to the history. In 1984, in a handwritten history of the home, Lydia Brandon told the story of the home and how it came to be. The sisters' third great-grandfather, James Gatlin, his wife, and son Ephraim came to Stewart County in 1802 and bought 200 acres here on the Cumberland River. This is the Gatlin Cemetery on that land. It's located near the Gatlin Point campground. A few notes I have on James Gatlin and his family say that he was born about 1754 and died 1835 at age 81. He came from North Carolina to the area in 1802 and he and his son Ephraim, along with others, petitioned for a new county, which would be Stewart County, in 1803, and the county was formed. He served in the Revolutionary War and later alongside his son Ephraim in the War of 1812. Ephraim was a sergeant in James Gray's company, and James served with him as a private when he was 58 years old. And this is his grave. It only says died 1835. I believe his wife Mary, who he married in 1784, is buried between him and this grave here. This mounded grave is that of Ephraim's wife, Elizabeth Bruton Gatlin. We'll come back to her in a minute. Ephraim's headstone is mostly unreadable now, but in his TVA file from the 1960s it shows that it says, "In memory of Ephraim Gatlin, born March 4th, 1785, died August 23rd, 1837. The TVA file for Elizabeth states a large pile of limestone rocks, the shape and size of a grave, no other marker, footstone possible. Ephraim and Elizabeth were married in 1805 and they raised 12 children. One of their sons, George W. Gatlin, was the Brandon sisters' great-grandfather. Ephraim was a farmer and also into politics for a while. In 1820, he was sent as a delegate from Tennessee to consider the Missouri Compromise. He was also a Baptist minister and served as the pastor of Crockett's Creek Baptist Church from 1825 to 1832. This is their son, Ephraim C., who passed away at 27 years old. Around 1830, Nathan Skinner bought land adjoining the Gatlin property, and he built the log home now known as the Skinner-Brandon home. His daughter, Mary Polly Skinner, married the sister's great-great-grandfather, Christopher Brandon, who lived at Tobaccoport, just across the river. Nathan Skinner, who first came to Tennessee in 1807, was an interesting character. Born in 1779, he first settled on Shelby Creek on the opposite side of the Cumberland River, also at Tobaccoport. He ran a store there and was married with 6 children. But in 1827, he filed for divorce from his first wife, Marcy, whom he'd married around 1801 or 1802. The court records on this divorce are quite a read. In part, it states that since the time of their marriage, he's lived with her and treated her as a kind and affectionate husband. He states that for some time past, his said wife has acted in so disgraceful a manner as to injure the standing of his family and wholly ruin his peace of mind. She has of late contracted habits of intoxication to great excess, and declares to her husband she will get drunk when she pleases and that he may help himself. He further states that she has become extremely extravagant and lays out all the money she can get hold of in purchase of fine clothing, insomuch that he has been compelled by advertisement to forewarn all persons from trading with her. He says if this was all, he could and would submit to live with her, but he further states that she's lost all sense of modesty and has been guilty, as he has discovered lately, of acts of adultery with several parties of the lowest character in society. So in 1827, their marriage was dissolved on grounds of adultery. In 1828, he then married Marina Vincent, and they moved across the river on property adjacent to the Gatlin farm, and he built this home. Skinner built the home very close to the main Dover-Eddyville Road. Both were river towns, and rivers were the main highways back then. A story passed down through the generations was that Skinner built his home close to the main road and used it as a sort of inn for the many travelers that would pass by on their way to and from the river landing. These weary travelers would see his large home lit up and ask to rest there for the night. Skinner welcomed these travelers, fed them, and gave them a comfortable place to rest. Then later in the night, he would ultimately take their lives, rob them, and bury their bodies in the surrounding hills and hollers. It was said that the ghosts of these travelers haunted the home and land, desperately trying to continue on their journeys. Another story was that Skinner was also a counterfeiter and kept his counterfeiting equipment in a trap door in the floor of one of the second-story bedrooms. These illegal activities might explain how Skinner amassed such wealth during his lifetime, owning a large home and 4,000 acres of land when he died in 1846. Or maybe they were just stories, legends to excite and interest the children of the family, perhaps to keep them out of the nearby woods, lest they come across a hungry wild animal and not the ghost of a weary traveler buried there. Who really knows? What we do know is Nathan's wife Marina died in December 1845. He then married Elizabeth Bruton in early 1846. They had a rare marriage contract drawn up, and it stated everything Elizabeth would get after Nathan's death. Both agreed to the contract, and it was written up on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1846. They were married soon after, and Nathan died 6 months later. He is buried not far from his home in the Mount Zion Cemetery next to Marina. Nathan Skinner's children had interesting stories of their own, and one such story involving his daughter Emmeline is that she was killed by one of her slaves with an iron skillet, and I'll be telling that story in a future video. The cemetery is now surrounded by the waters of Bard's Lake. This photo of a Marina stone is from Find a Grave when it was in much better condition than how I found it. Nathan Skinner's third and last wife, Elizabeth, is buried nearby, although I noticed they misspelled her maiden name on the headstone. But she is buried near her second husband, Levi Rayburn. After Skinner's death, the Brandon sisters' great-grandfather, George W. Gatlin, purchased the home from Nathan Skinner Jr. and had the house refinished. He hired a carpenter and cabinet maker from Murray, Kentucky to do the work. The house was weatherboarded and sealed inside and out with yellow poplar. The planks for the floors and ceilings were tongue and groove. The house outside was painted white and the rooms light blue and other light colors. He had a porch enclosed except for the one across the front. The enclosed porch was made into a dining room, a kitchen, a pantry, and one small bedroom. The original house had a brick kitchen and a cellar a short distance from the house. He had cypress shingles from New Orleans shipped by steamboat to roof the house. Things were going well for the Gatlin family, but then in 1861 the Civil War began, and Lydia writes, Great-grandfather George organized Company D of the 50th Tennessee Regiment of the Confederate Army. He was out on a scouting trip when he was intercepted by Union soldiers and was wounded in the head. He was a member of the Masonic Lodge, and he gave the Mason sign to Major John J. Mudd, a Union soldier, who picked him up and took him to the nearest house. Major Mudd requested they send for his wife and family physician. So his wife Minerva arrived along with Dr. Jesse Stone, and they carried George home. But someone had reported that grandfather said all he wanted was another shot at the damn Yankees. And so Grant sent his bodyguards to get him, and they arrived at the house about dark and spent the night there. They stacked their rifles at the foot of the stairs, and grandfather heard one of them say, "We are fools. They can use our guns to hold us prisoners." But grandfather spoke up and said, "Gentlemen, I have given you my word. You will not be molested." And they spent the night there and were to have taken grandfather back the next day. but they all agreed he was in no condition to travel. So after he assured them that he had never made any such statement, they returned without him. And grandfather recovered from the wounds, but he was never able to do any more active duty during the war. Close to the end of the war, in April 1865, George's wife, Minerva Gray Gatlin, died of pneumonia at age 36. The Tennessee and Cumberland rivers were flooding, and so they carried her casket in a canoe across the high floodwaters to the Boyd Cemetery near Fort Henry in Blue Springs. This entire cemetery was relocated for the Kentucky Dam Project in the 1940s. George and Minerva Gatlin now rest at the Boyd Memorial Cemetery in Blue Springs. I have 3 generations of family members in this cemetery, and this is where I will also be laid to rest. George was so grieved over the passing of Minerva that he sold the house back to Nathan Skinner Jr. and moved closer to the cemetery in Blue Springs. Nathan Jr. then sold the house to a wealthy man from Clarksville, Mr. Robert S. Chilton. He had a grocery store on Franklin Street in downtown Clarksville. Lydia wrote that Mr. Chilton added large gardens to the property, flower gardens, vegetable gardens, and orchards. He even added a spring house for the spring. Lydia wrote that Mr. Chilton lived here about 10 years until he died, and this death notice was in the Clarksville newspaper, printed August 1875, and it reads, Mr. Robert S. Chilton, formerly of this county but late of Stewart County, died at his residence Tuesday last. Here, where he lived for a long term of years, he was known and appreciated for his many noble traits of character. He was honest, intelligent, unassuming, with a social disposition. Peace to his ashes. I was unable to find a grave for Robert, but one of his daughters, Ada Maud Abernathy, is buried in the Mount Zion Cemetery where Nathan Skinner is. She died in 1878 at age 21 from pneumonia following the measles. There is a typo on her headstone. It lists her father as Robert L., and it should say Robert S., the same as her obituary. There is a ghost story associated with the Chilton family. I almost didn't include it, but it's posted on Ancestry, so it must be true, right? Anyway, it says they were a close-knit family who stayed pretty much to themselves. This may have been because they were not natives of the area, but it's more likely because of their son, who had been deformed quite severely at birth. In those days, such a tragedy was looked upon with shame, and a person who was mentally handicapped or crippled was kept at home and hidden from the public eye. This child, whose name is not known, stayed mostly in his little room on the first floor, where he spent many hours peeking out the windows, trying to see the world that lay beyond the row of cedar trees in the yard, which had been planted there to block outsiders' view of the house and its occupants. Before he got to be very old, the boy died, and so the legend goes, as long as the house stood, his halting steps and the sound of his crutches could be heard at night in that house. In 1886, George Gatlin bought the house once again from the Chilton heirs, and Lydia wrote, "The house and land then remained in our family until TVA took over." The 3 Brandon sisters were teachers their whole careers and were never married. They were well known and well liked in Stewart County. I've read they were very intelligent, a bit quirky, and very generous. Some have said they reminded them of the Baldwin sisters from the TV show The Waltons, minus Papa's recipe in the basement, of course. They were always well dressed, and when company came to visit, they wore dainty white gloves and served tea and cookies. The 2 Brandon sisters, Helen and Lydia, eventually moved back to Stewart County to spend their final years. They attended the Dover Christian Church and are buried beside their parents in the old Dover Cemetery. Lydia Acree Brandon, born September 9, 1907, died February 4, 1997, age 89. This must be someone between them, but I'm not sure who it is. Helen Gould Brandon, born March 9, 1905, died June 17, 1995, age 90. Minerva Ruth Brandon, born July 20th, 1914, died May 20th, 1984, age 69. This is their parents, Vivian and George Brandon. This is their grandparents, Pinckney and Georgianne Gatlin Brandon. Pinckney was a Confederate soldier in the Civil War and was held as a POW on Johnson's Island in Ohio. He never regained his health after the war, and he died in 1874 at age 36. I'm so glad the Brandon sisters chose to move their historic old home rather than letting it be destroyed by the TVA, and we're all so happy that it still stands. May it stand another 200 years.